You're a podcast listener, and this is a podcast ad. Reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Lips and Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a reproduced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience with Lips and Ads. Go to lipsandads.com now. That's LIBSYN ads.com.
I read this sign at a center that treated veterans for PTSD and other things like that. And the sign said, "Don't look back. You're not going that way." I loved it.
Well, welcome back to Fill in the Blanks. Today, we delve into the extraordinary life of Bob Parsons. Now, Bob is a man who defied the odds, dodged grenades, and transformed chaos into explosive success. Bob faced adversity from the outset. His parents were gamblers and struggled to make ends meet, but Bob's resilience and determination would shape his path in ways he could never have imagined. He is a Marine Corps, Vietnam combat veteran. Bob didn't just dodge literal grenades, he also navigated the chaos of war. You might recognize Bob as the founder of GoDaddy, the company that disrupted the domain registration industry and made Super Bowl ads unforgettable. But that's just one chapter. Bob's ventures span motorcycles, golf, PXG golf, as a matter of fact, real estate, finance, and really importantly, philanthropy. His audacity and innovation continue to inspire, and Bob is here to talk about his memoir, Fire in the Hole, the untold story of my traumatic life and explosive success. Now, this book pulls no punches. It's part action movie, part business playbook, and entirely authentic. I highly recommend this book. I've read it cover to cover, and you'll find it anywhere books are sold. You can get it on Amazon. You want to buy 2 copies of this, one to read and one to give somebody you care about. And they'll want to buy 2 copies, but just buy a stack of these because you're going to want to give them to people that you want to make changes in their life. Bob is with us. Bob, welcome.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be here, Dr. Phil.
I really thank you for taking the time. I know you flew here today. We just did a Dr. Phil episode, and the audience was absolutely spellbound. They were intrigued. You are a charming individual. You had them on the edge of their seats.
Well, that's why my wife married me.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Either that or she just had a weak day. It's one of the two, right?
I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah, I think we both married way over our heads, and let's just go with that.
That's for sure.
Bob, you've had certainly not a boring life, and we're going to use some of the things that we talked about on the show here, but there are some things I want to go deeper on. And for those of you that are listening, if you haven't yet seen the show that I did with Bob and Renee, just go to Merit Plus app, which you can get on the App Store or Google Play, and download it and click on the Bob Parsons Show and watch that. It is really interesting. Now, Bob, you had a struggle with PTSD for a lot of your life, but you found some solutions to it. And one of the tools, and it is a tool, it's not a cure-all, easy fix. One of the tools is using psychedelics as part of a protocol in dealing with your PTSD. Let's talk some more about that. How did you find your way to that, and what did it involve for you?
Well, for me, it had been 49 years since the war, and I knew I had some problems.
Now, this was in July of 2018, right? So it's been
2017.
2017?
Yeah. I didn't want to go anywhere. I wanted to mostly be alone.
Mm-hmm.
Married to just a wonderful, wonderful woman. And I mean, to not be that way is not good. It's a good way to get cut from the team, Dr. Phil.
Yep.
Yeah. And, I was depressed a lot, and, sometimes just cried out of the blue, mostly when I was alone. Nobody would hear it. And Anyhow, I did a number of things, but the thing that really made the difference for me was I happened to read this book by Michael Pollan called How to Change Your Mind. And it's a wonderful book. It reads like a novel.
Mm-hmm.
It is a treatise on psychedelics, what they've been used for over the years. And a better way to say psychedelics is plant medicine,
Right.
right? And, and how they were first used in the country, how they became illegal, why they should be legal again, and how they can help. And, when I read that, I was just inspired. Now, I had never taken psychedelics in my life. And my first thing that I did was I told my wife, Renee, I would love to do this. And she had me hooked up with 2 guides that treated veterans and others with psychedelic, they called them tools, for a number of years, and they did it under the radar. So anyhow, I met with them a couple weeks later, and then not too long after that, we met in Hawaii, and over a period of 4 days, I was treated with 3 different types of psychedelics. The first was ayahuasca, which is a real nasty tasting thing that is made from a vine in South America. And that is a very potent psychedelic. And, when I did that, I did a, strong dose. But, it was obvious, as we got into it that, I could have used a stronger dose. But, we talked about things that were bothering me from my childhood to the war and that sort of thing. And, whenever you have to look, those sort of things head on, it is hard. And it is something that you really don't want to do again. But nevertheless, that's what we did. Some tears. And, I could feel a difference after that first day. The second day, my guide told me, he said, one of my guides, he said, I made a teapot of tea made from psilocybin or magic mushrooms. And he said, it holds 3 cups. I made it very strong, so you'll only need 1 cup. Now, what I'm about to tell you, I swear is true. I drank all 3 cups, and I ate the tea bags. Now,
you went all in.
Well, I was righteously stoned.
Yeah.
And, that night, I even flashed back. I had all sorts of tears, and we talked about many things, and I could tell I was hallucinating at times, but after that, I was like, I was so much better. And the next day, we took the day off, and Renee and I, my wife, went and played golf. We played 9 holes, and Phil, I knew that all the fauna knew I was there. The trees and the plants and the grass. I could feel them. And, they were looking at me with kindness. Now that sounds nuts, but that's how I felt. And when I went to putt, it was like the grass on the green would say to me, hit it here, Bobby. And I would, and it'd go right in the cup. I have never putted that good before or since. But boy, I sure did with the help of the plants and the grass. So the last day, it was LSD, and that was that was very strong, and again a lot of tears, a lot of seeing things that had me just tore up, and I I just forgave it and looked past it. It's not like it, before that I couldn't even think about it, but then I could, Did it still bother me? Yeah, a little bit. But I was past it, and I was moving forward. And so after that, everybody noticed the change in me. I mean, my flash temper gone, my self isolation gone. I wanted to be with other people, go places with Renee, um, and I was more kind, more willing to listen, more willing, and to compliment, so forth. The people that my wife was the first to notice. Then when I went to work, people were saying, "What happened to Bob? This guy here is the nicest guy I've ever worked for." I mean, it just was so nice. And like I've told you, it had been 49 years since the war. I finally came home.
Well, that's an amazing experience. Let's talk about when you were going through those 4 days. We know about the third day, but so people understand if they're considering doing this, you went through and processed some things that you had been living with. Was there a time in there that you were afraid, that you regretted it? Was there a time that it was coming too fast or you were overwhelmed? Was there
Well,
any
it
downside
was
to it?
nothing like that. Every fear I had, um, just did not materialize. I mean, I felt, and yet I felt in control. I felt like you have these illusions about psychedelics and all from the press exaggerating stuff where you're going to think you can fly and jump off a building. I mean, nothing like that happened. I just felt pretty good. Now, was it hard? Yeah, it was hard. And going through, all the stuff that bothers you and you think, man, I sure don't want to do that again. But it really made a difference in my life, a wonderful difference. And I believe that however long I have on this planet, psychedelics have helped me, and I'll enjoy it a lot more now. The important thing to point out with psychedelics is if you just go out and drop acid or take mushrooms or ayahuasca, you may go for a ride, but it's not going to cure you of anything. It is the therapy that does the healing. The psychedelics make it possible, and by that I mean the psychedelics make you receptive, make you, and want to make changes and do, and just of the mind to do it. But it's by going through that with the therapy and confronting those internal demons that's what makes the difference.
And you call them guides that were helping you. Are these people trained in cognitive behavior therapy or dialectical behavior therapy, or are they trained in helping you process this when you're going through it?
Is that a serious question?
Mm-hmm.
No. What they are is they are experienced with working with people that are trying to make a difference in their life. Now, these two particular guides travel all over the world, and I was just lucky that Renee was able to hook me up with them. But I mean, they were in Dubai, they were in Slovakia, they were in Croatia, Italy, France. I mean, all these places, and it's just part of what they do. And it's because they have a really good, they have a really good reputation of treating people for all the various mental maladies that psychedelics can make a difference with.
Yeah. Did you have any occasion it's been, I guess, 7 years, have you had any occasion where you felt like you needed a boost, needed to do this in small doses since then, short sessions since then, any maintenance with the plant-based substances since then?
Okay, no, but yes. And what I mean by no is I didn't feel like I needed to do it, anymore. But I'm in touch with some of the guys that I served with in Vietnam. And Brownie's one of them. Our squad leader, Barry George, is another. And, I got our guides together, and I went through it with them too, because I figured the likelihood of them doing it, if I did it again, would be much, much greater. And so I did. And do I believe the second time helped me? Yeah, I think I was better for it. And I know for sure it helped them, because, I could ask them one thing, but, you really want to know the truth, ask their wife.
Mhm.
And, wives will tell you how to calibrate the cabbage.
Yeah, boy.
Right, yeah.
And so when you went back through it to companion them, did you pick up some things that you didn't pick up the first time? Did you get some insights that were reinforced, or find something that was a stone unturned from the previous initial time?
That it'd be hard for me to answer, because some of it, I just don't even remember what I talked about. But I do know that I felt better for it, and I think I was, and it is well, it is something. Now, if I didn't have the relationship that I do with those two men, my machine gunner and my squad leader, I mean, I trust these guys with my life. I would not have went through it again. And the reason for that is I just didn't want to get hooked up in something like that if it went south.
Yeah. This message is sponsored by Greenlight. As your kids get older, some things about parenting get easier. Other things don't get easy, like having that conversation about money. Kids won't really know how to manage their money until they're actually in charge of it. They can clean up after themselves, sort of, but with Greenlight, you give them a reason to do it. They realize when you choose the behavior, you choose the consequences, and the consequences can be money. When I was growing up and I had to do chores like mow the lawn, clean out the garage, and I might get paid for it, I might not, it might be a week later or whatever, it was awfully hard at a young age to connect the two. Now, that's where Greenlight can help. Greenlight is a debit card and money app made for families. Greenlight app also includes a chores feature where you can set up one-time or recurring chores and reward kids with an allowance for a job well done. Now, millions of parents and kids are learning about money on Greenlight. Sign up for Greenlight today and get your first month free when you go to greenlight.com/Phil. That's greenlight.com/Phil to try Greenlight for free. greenlight.com/Phil.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
You've been through this and you went through it with them. Did they have a similar experience to what you had? Did they go down a similar pathway, or was it more vertical for them? Did they go down?
Well, here's the deal. I think they both would tell you that they were better for it. I think both would tell you that it's one of the hardest things they've done in their life. I've seen a lot of tears from those guys. And I mean, these are two guys that I've never really seen cry. I've seen Brownie cry on stage tonight, but that's a different thing. Yeah, Brownie. Brownie's sitting in the audience here.
Right. So how would you tell people to decide if this is right for them? How does someone determine, hey, that's something I should pursue? Is there something that's antecedent to that they should do in preparation or to qualify themselves, or what would you recommend?
Well, say, first of all, the thing to realize, unless you're like in Denver or Monotma County up in Oregon, right outside of Portland, this stuff is patently illegal. So you have to be aware of that. The second thing is is that, if you find two guides and you're fortunate enough to do that, you're going to have to really trust them and to feel comfortable with them. And there you go. And to answer another question, will I refer people to guides if somebody contacts me? The answer is no.
So if they're going to do this, they need to find it on their own.
They're on their own, baby.
Yeah. But there are ways to do that. I mean, you can get on the internet, and is there something they should watch for people that are charlatans or don't know what they're doing?
Well, like in anything, I would think probably a fair percentage of the people that do this, because, it is rare to find somebody that is a licensed counselor, because a licensed counselor will not want to risk their license by getting involved with something that's illegal, even though it is wonderful if they do it and what they accomplish. That's more of a matter for the FDA. So, and then that being the case, I have no idea how to go about finding guides that would be helpful, and other than just my speculation. And the reason I was fortunate is because Renee, through networking, a friend of a friend of a friend, is how I was fortunate enough to find my two guides.
Maybe a good place to start, and one thing that we can do, is suggest that people read How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. That's a book that is available, and that's maybe a place for people to start and gather information about what the fit might be for them.
Yeah, that's for sure. And then the other thing to do is maybe if you're willing to travel and you don't live in these areas, you could spend some time researching in Denver and talk to places that actually sell mushrooms and that sort of thing, and work it that way.
Yeah. And, I'm not saying that it is right for everybody, but I think people can make up their own minds about this, and they have to determine. You were years, decades of living with this. There gets a point when you say, I've got to be willing to do something different than what I've been doing, because if it's not working and you're living with the same thing year after year after year, you got to be willing to try something different. I'm not saying this is that something different, but if what you're doing is not working, you either need to change therapists, change modalities, do something, but not just live and continue to suffer. Sometimes people's suffering gets so deeply entrenched, they just think that's the way to live.
Yeah. Well, that's for sure, and that is something that you would need to overcome. Now, there is one thing that I believe should be mentioned. There is an African plant called the iboga plant, and there's a psychedelic that's derived from it called ibogaine. And ibogaine is the only plant that I'm aware of that a 3 or 4 day treatment can cure a heroin or cocaine, an opioid addiction. Absolutely cure. The individual doesn't want it anymore. And that is in Tijuana. There's a number of clinics that specialize in that. Now, one of the problems with the ibogaine is it's can put a strain on an individual's heart, and these clinics are excellent with monitoring that, and if they tell you they'll get you through it, they will. But the one thing I will tell you is anybody that has been treated with ibogaine will tell you that it is rocket ship intense. They will face everything that they need to face, and it will be harsh. They will vomit a lot. They will. I mean, it is just an unbelievable thing. Now, with the strain on the heart, that's the reason why. One of the reasons why the FDA has not approved it for use in the United States. Now, Dr. Phil, let me ask you a question. how many people would you say this country loses to uh, uh, opioids taken the wrong way or containing fentanyl or some other stuff like that a year?
I think it's in the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands. Now, how many people would you think have we lose a year due to not being able to handle ibogaine?
I would think it's a very low number.
About 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And I have some friends, and I had three of them, and they all had their sons that were addicted to heroin, and I pointed them to these clinics in Mexico, and they opted that, they said, no, I can't send my son down there, and put him through that. 2 of those 3 are now dead from overdoses. So, and I mean, they would not have died if they went down to Tijuana and found the right clinic.
You're a podcast listener, and this is a podcast ad. Reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Lips and Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a reproduced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience with Lips and Ads. Go to lipsandads.com now. That's LIBSYN ads.com.
Well, I think enabling is a word that gets overused so much that people don't really think about what it means. But so often, parents that I believe and label as enabling their kids on drugs, whether it's giving them a place to stay or giving them money or looking the other way or whatever, because they say, I don't want to find out that my kid's dead under a bridge somewhere. I think they're basically doing that not because they want to keep their child alive, but because they don't want to face the anxiety of worrying about whether their child's going to be alive or not. I think they just don't want to face the hard choices of putting their grown kid, their teenager or 20-something, on a hard path. They put them out, maybe they're going to wind up in a bad situation, but we know for sure if they don't put them on that hard path, they're going to continue to shoot and poison in their veins, and they're going to die for sure. That stuff will kill you. If they don't get them on a hard path and make the tough choices to get off the drugs, like you say, maybe 2 or 3 people a year die, that's going to be tough for their kid. Maybe their kid's going to be mad at them, but I'd rather have my kid mad at me than dead.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't understand how parents justify that to themselves. They're doing that to make themselves feel better, not to make their child healthier. I just don't get that. Yeah. But, they don't want to face that. But let me ask you something. The Marines, it seems to me, changed your life in a huge, huge way. To this day, they've written on the slate of who Bob Parsons is. Fair statement?
Yeah, it's absolutely a fair statement.
It also left you with a very debilitating disease in PTSD. If you knew then what you know now, would you do it again?
Yes, I would. And the reason is much of that cross that I had to carry because of it. And as much as grief as it caused everybody around me, that is what broke me out of that cycle of poverty that I was in Baltimore. And it was that family that I fell into in the Marine Corps. And it was the first time I really belonged to something that mattered, that really taught me what I needed to know. Now, they did often, their lessons came with a boot in the ass, but that's the Marine Corps. It's when I was wounded in Vietnam, I'll tell you how strong this is. I was wounded. After I was wounded, I didn't have to go back because when I got to Okinawa, and I still wasn't healed up right. I went in this casualty company, and when I finally did get healed up enough, the doctor there was a really good guy. He said to me, son, if you've done your part, if you want, I will keep you here on Okinawa for the duration of your enlistment. And so I'd rotate home and I wouldn't have to go back. Well, I said, Doc, I want to go back. And then he finally put the orders through for me to do it. And then I met a friend of mine who, it was this unbelievable coincidence. I saved this guy's life the first night I was in the bush. And this guy, I ran into him on Okinawa. He had been wounded, and it was the third time for him in the Marine Corps. If you're wounded 3 times, you can get out of combat. And he took and said, I can get you this job for this guy that just rotated, and you won't have to go back to a rifle company. And I told him, I said, brother, I don't mind going back. And anyhow, so we got it done, and that's why I didn't go back the first time. The other 2 times, I put in a request for transfer to go back, and both times the company gunnery sergeant tore it up in front of me and just said, you'll get yourself killed. He was probably right, But so the point I'm trying to make is that family pull, that camaraderie is so strong that I'd have done anything to be with those guys. I loved them. Still do to this day. Yeah, like Brownie's sitting over here. I'd love you, Brownie. Yeah, he's waving to me. Yeah, so anyhow, yeah. When the dot-com crash happened, I mean, we were just a small .com, but I was paying my bills, and unlike every other .com who was operating on venture capital money and bank investors and stock market money, I wasn't. And of course, the moment that .com crash started, they vanished. We would have 1 to 2 not competitors, sometimes competitors, but 1 to 2 companies we did business with every week just disappear. I mean, we'd send them checks to pay their bills. The checks would come back to us undelivered. And so what happened was, before that, I was unable to buy advertising at any price. And of course, it wasn't a good deal, so I didn't buy it. And after that, I had guys standing in line to buy me advertising at Smoking Deals. I had more friends than I thought I had. And this advertising that we did buy and that we did run resonated with prospective customers because all that noise from the dot-com crash vanished. And it was right after that happened that GoDaddy became cash flow positive for the first time in October 2001. And never missed a month since.
Let me ask you something that you can answer 100 different ways. I'm sure there's one answer, but you can describe it 100 different ways. What drives you? I mean, you've accomplished so much in your life. You're impacting other people, but you still get up. You've given me a copy of your book. I've given you a copy of mine, and I set out 10 things that I think are really important in my book. And number 1 of them is be who you are on purpose. Be who you are on purpose. Live with intent. And you do that every day. You and I are not spring chickens. We got a little mileage on us. What drives you now at this stage of your life? What makes you get up every day and live with purpose?
Well, I am so used to doing nothing but that I, it is like some people say, well, what's your hobby or what's your bucket list? I love my businesses and I love what I do. It is, to me, it is just fun. It is fulfilling. I only look forward. I rarely look back. One of the things I read, and I read this sign and I was just there in Minneapolis, where it was a center that treated guys joined it, the veterans for PTSD and other things like that. and the sign said, "Don't look back. You're not going that way." I loved it.
Yeah, exactly. That is a good way to put it. Everybody has different forms of currency. I mean, some people work for money. That's monetary currency. Some people work for attention, social currency. Other people work for just the satisfaction of achievement. What do you think is your biggest currency?
Well, my biggest currency is to make a difference. I like, for example, with my golf club company, I like to make the finest clubs in the world.
Well, you do that.
And I believe I do it. At Scottsdale National, my goal was to build a place that was unlike any other.
You've done that.
And I bought that golf course for $100,000 plus another 500,000. So you could say $600,000. And I've since put $340 million into it. And, I'll tell you what, Dr. Phil, you can do a lot with $340 million.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. But you enjoy being there, right?
I love being there.
You still enjoy being there?
Oh, that's my absolute happy place. My favorite time is just being out with just me and my wife. I taught her how to play golf. And, we gamble a little bit with each other, and she cleans my clock.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah. You met Robin, and her dad was a driving range pro in Duncan, Oklahoma, and she doesn't play golf anymore. I got her out about 10 years ago on the men's tees at the TPC here in Las Colinas, and she was 1 over for 5 holes.
Wow.
I was like, give me those clubs. get back in the house. But she grew up picking up range balls. They didn't have a tractor, so she was out there with a bucket picking up range balls.
Wow.
For her dad. Like you, her dad was an alcoholic and a gambler, and he gambled at golf. My dad was an alcoholic and a really chaotic alcoholic. So we grew up, poor and chaotic, a lot like you described as well.
Now, you know how it is.
Yeah, I do know how it is. You got to find passion and currency. I feel it with you and everything that you talk about and everything that you do. And that's why I think you inspire other people so much. I think they feel it in you. And I'm serious when I say if people read this book, Fire in the Hole, whether they have PTSD or whether they don't, I think they'll find things in this book that will change the way they get up and go about being who they are every day. I think there are messages in there for people, young and old, professional, non-tradespeople, whatever. I think it impacts people in the way they go about being who they are. And we need that in this country.
Well, my goal was to do that and to make it a good read. And you're right, we do need it.
Who do you think is going to be the next president?
Dr. Phil, that's above my pay grade.
Yeah.
And the one thing I can tell you is both Democrats and Republicans and independents all buy golf clubs. So when it comes to politics, it's between me and the voting booth when I close the curtain.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I stay as apolitical as I possibly can. I'm not sure I trust any of them. But that's why I talk about cultural issues, not political issues. I don't want same party controlling president, House, and Senate. If they all get on the same team, we could get a runaway train here. I like gridlock. I think that keeps us safe.
Well, that's for sure.
That's for sure. Bob, thank you for talking to me about all this.
Well, it's been my absolute pleasure to be here and to spend some time with you. And I can't think of anything I would have rather have done today.
Well, you're very kind. I certainly can't think of anybody I'd have rather spent time talking to, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Bob and I talked about some really interesting subject matter when he was a guest on Dr. Phil Primetime on Merritt Street Media. I found what he had to share so inspirational and compelling, I wanted to include it here on Fill in the Blanks as well. Here are a few of the outstanding excerpts. You went from starting a business in your basement to selling it for $64 million.
I did.
How'd you do that?
Well, one step at a time.
Yeah.
It was, not easy at first. It took me a while to learn how to sell shrink wrap software. I mean, it took me about 3 years, but once I did, it was off to the races.
Well, you taught yourself how to do coding and all, right?
I did. Yeah, with my real job, I was at Redwood City, California, and I had a big delay to catch the flight. I was going back to Baltimore. And so I went to the Stanford campus and I bought a book on programming in a basic computer language. I read that during the layover, wrote my first computer program or two on the flight back. And it just so happened back in 1975, we were owned by a company called Control Data, one of the first computer companies. And there was a dumb terminal in my office that ran the basic computer language. So that's how I learned how to do it.
I mean, you read it during the layover.
I did, yeah.
How'd you stay awake? Computer coding books are hard to read. That's not easy to do.
Well, at the time, Dr. Fell, I found it pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And it really charged me up and kept me going. And part of that was PTSD. I like to bury myself in things, and the PTSD kept me going.
Because you escape from some of that when you really dig into something, right? You lose yourself into content, yeah. Now, you write in your book, Fire in the Hole, about the biggest lesson you learned. And I actually had an excerpt pulled up of it. All you have in this world is your word. That's your value. If you establish a reputation for keeping your promises and for being as solid as your handshake, it will always serve you well. To this day, everything I do in business starts from these lessons. I still live by them, even now. Knowing you, I can attest that's how you are, and that is your reputation. Where did that come from?
It is just something that, I did over the years. My father was somebody, he wasn't much of a businessman, but he always kept his word. He told me that's something you need to place a lot of value on, and I did. And in the Marine Corps, they reinforced it. I've never changed that. And, I will bid on deals, always with a fair price, but I will have people, other businessmen, give me the deal over somebody that maybe bids more money or better terms, because they know I'll do exactly what I say I'll do.
Mm-hmm. And you've made some deals, because you started GoDaddy and you sold the majority stake, not all of it, but the majority stake in it in 2011 for $2.3 billion.
I did.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, that's a stack of cash.
Yeah. I'll take your word for that. That was the biggest deal you'd made at that point, right?
Absolutely.
What was your thinking when you walked away from making that deal?
You always wonder if you did the right deal, right? Yeah. But, I think I just smiled and I was thinking, well done, Bobby. I got to tell you, you show me a successful business person, and I'll show you somebody that has failed time and time again, because that's how we learn.
That's right. Yeah, but you stay with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I always said the difference between winners and losers is winners do things losers don't want to do, and one of those things is you do it until. You don't do it for a month, you don't do it for a year, you do it until you get where you're going. You do it until you get it right. And I think that was pretty right.
Yeah, and there's also one more thing, is winners are doing it for the right reason. I mean, they're building their business to make a difference, to deliver something nobody else is doing. And it could be at a price nobody else is doing, or at a product or a way of delivering it. But, that's the number one thing that's driving them. What they're not doing it for is to make a buck.
Yeah. You got to be passionate about what you're doing. You discovered, in really looking into your life and your history, that your childhood had as bigger impact on you even than the trauma from Vietnam.
Yeah, like so many of us, Dr. Phil, I grew up tough. My mother, for the most part, and I loved her dearly, wouldn't have traded her for anybody. She had a number of untreated nervous breakdowns when I was a child. My mom and dad were gamblers, so we were less than broke. It just was hard. My mother used to lay into me. I had a bedroom in the basement. She'd call me upstairs, and I'd stand there in my little jockey shorts. I guess I was about 8 years old, and she'd say, "Where's your father?" And I'd say, "Mom, I don't know." And then she'd go, "Where's your father?" So, "Mom, I don't know." And she'd literally just scream it. And then she would take her head and start pounding it into the wall. She'd start pulling her hair out in clumps. She'd make a noise like a wounded animal. And and this happened again and again and again. And I would just fade back into my bedroom.
Yeah, and when this was happening, did you know this wasn't normal?
Yeah, I knew it was wrong. I used to lay in bed and wonder why that happened to Mom. Why all those terrible things were happening. And I was never afraid, but I was ashamed. And it's just hard. It's just hard for me to understand.
Yeah, of course. And we're talking about Bob's book, Fire in the Hole, and I've spent most of my life studying success. I've studied champions in every walk of life, and they've all had to overcome many things. And it's why I've described this book as a page turner. I just absolutely couldn't put it down. There's wisdom in these pages. And in this book, he writes in one passage, "In many ways, I grew up to be like my dad. And in many ways, thankfully, I didn't. Despite everything, I always had a lot of respect for my father. He had his faults, but he was my dad and I loved him. As lacking as both of my parents were, I still loved them." Was there a point that you had to forgive them for the things that they visited on your life?
Of course I did. And, I always loved them, but as I grew up, I was a little resentful. I always kept that under my vest. And then as I got older and I understood why they were the way they were, then, I couldn't hold them accountable for that. They were victims.
Right. So there's a generational legacy. And you say your dad drank too much, he gambled, had affairs, was rarely home. Maybe that was modeled for him. But the problem is the kids pick up the tab for that. They pay the price for that, and it took its toll on you.
Did. Yeah, it was just about as difficult as could be. It, I guess, made me an introvert. Always kept my problems to myself. Mm-hmm. And I always had followed in business where I've learned to keep my own counsel. If I have a decision to make, I keep it to myself.
Right. And you got to the 5th grade, and the way you describe it in the book, you said there was the 5th grade ceremony where they called everybody up, and they just didn't call you up.
Yeah, it was me and 2 other knuckleheads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how you found out you're not passing the 5th grade. And you said you went out a window and took off running because you didn't want to tell your parents that you'd failed the 5th grade.
Yeah, that's correct. I ran my heart out. My father was holding my brother's report card, and he says to me, "Where's your report card?" And that's when I told a fib. I said, "This is the best I could come up with, Dr. Phil." I said, "This year, if you passed, you didn't get a report card." And he goes, "Let me get this straight." He goes, "If you passed, you didn't get a report card." And as serious as I could be, I said, "That's right, Dad." And he's holding my brother's report card. and so he looks at me like he heard a dog that heard a strange sound. And then finally he said, "All right, get in the car." And off we went.
You didn't get caught.
No, I didn't get caught. I was on death row all summer.
Yeah.
And I just knew if they found out, be hell to pay. And they never did find out, because on the first day of school, I went and got in line with the 6th graders, right? And Frankie and Anthony, the other two guys that failed along with me, they're still in the 5th grade line, and they're waving me over, and I'm going, no. And I'm looking away. And finally, the bell rings. So I walk in, and the nun for the 6th grade that year was Sister St. Thomas, pulls me out of line, and she said, Sister Brenda told me what you did. She told me that you failed, but you didn't wait around for her to come back and fail you. You ran out and put yourself up. She didn't know what to do. Then she said those 4 words, so she passed you.
I love it. All right. Well, Bob Parsons came home from war determined to make something of himself in the business world. He got his degree and built multiple successful businesses, but behind closed doors, he was struggling with horrible PTSD for 20 years. Now, Bob's wife, Renee Parsons, has been by his side since their marriage in 2009. Renee, how did this impact y'all's relationship and marriage?
Oh, gosh. Well, it definitely had an impact. And it was confusing for me, too, because I wasn't sure what it was. And at that time, we weren't really calling it PTSD. Bob really didn't know at that time the extent of it, or if he did, he wasn't talking about it. And so I really didn't know why the behavior was what it was sometimes. He was loving and fun and spontaneous and romantic. And then there would be times where, he was down or, depressed and or had a short fuse. And it was confusing at the time because I wasn't sure why that was happening. And then throughout our relationship, I saw him seeking answers for himself and always trying to improve his own life and contentment and happiness. And so that was really, what I loved about him, and that I could see him trying to make it different.
You could feel the struggle.
Yeah.
Bob, you admit you had suicidal thoughts. You say in the book, as my PTSD got worse, I began to suffer crippling nightmares and occasional flashbacks. It was debilitating, and yes, once I even thought about killing myself. What were the nightmares? What were the flashbacks? And how did it get you to that low point?
Well, the nightmares were, always different. I mean, there'd be times I would dream we were in and I bet you had dreams like this too. We're in a firefight and I can't get any ammunition. There's other times when I would dream that there was a bunch of NVA, North Vietnamese Army, outside the house, and I would shoot them. And then when I got closer, it was just American kids. I mean, it would just freak me out. The suicidal thoughts. I mean, it was more ideation than me actually making a plan. So I'd be very depressed. I would be crying when there was no reason to cry. It just felt so black, like I was in just blackness. And then I would break out of it. But then the next day I'd have to deal with it again. So it's a real thing, and it's an unpleasant thing.
Were there times through this that you were able to feel joy, or was it always present?
Yes, there were. And particularly it was something to do with the family, or believe it or not, my computer programming would give me joy, and that's why I work so hard on it. Matter of fact, PTSD powered me to work, to get my first business going. And I'd never done that without the PTSD. But what I did is I buried myself in my work to get through it.
Yeah. That could work for a time. You can run, but you'll just die tired because you can't outrun it. It's always going to be there.
Always.
Well, Bob Parsons says what he's proudest of is not his business, but his contributions to the charity world. Nate, Rotan is the CEO of 1 in 10, a foundation that received over $2 million in grants from the Bob and Renee Parsons Foundation. Bob, where did your compassion for the LGBTQ community come from?
All too often when a family learns that their son or daughter is gay, they throw them out and turn their back on them. And then here you have this kid who is on the streets alone, and it is just horrific. Now, what 1 in 10 does is they find these kids and they first give them some accommodations, and then they teach them that they're part of the American dream too.
And Nate, how have their grants changed your life just personally?
I went to one of our youth's apartment homes that we were providing. And I said, Joaquin, what's your favorite thing about living in this apartment? This is someone who had been on the streets prior to coming into our housing program. He just pointed to the lock. And he said, it's this right here. It's the first time I have felt safe in years. Now, we were able to provide him this safe place to live, all the wraparound services, and see him truly flourish in his life. And that's the magic of what the Parsons Foundation is able to do. Bob talks about in his book his love of comic books, and particularly the ones with superheroes. What many of our youth don't know is the superhero that's behind 1 in 10 is Bob and Renee Parsons.
In fact, you guys are committed through your foundation to donating $1 million every 14 days, correct?
That's correct, yeah. When you're basically awarding or giving away money, you have a lot of friends.
Yeah.
So what we look to do is like 1 in 10, we like to award money where it's going to make a difference. I had 2 cousins who I love dearly, both gay, but I lost both of them to AIDS, and I almost want to cry telling you about it. But, it just was, it's a community that, we could make a difference in, that needed it, and we did.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. And you've overcome so much in your life, and you're taking your success and paying it forward and helping others overcome the challenges in their life. And I tell you, my friend, I'm proud to know you, and I'm proud to have read your book and commend it to other people.